Today's daf we're going to be learning is about Zarah daf Yuchet. Tov to everyone. Today's daf is sponsored by Emma Rimberg in memory of her beloved father, Dr. Eric and Glick Yitzchak Nisan Ben Yaakov et Fega. Though you died 35 years ago, your wisdom and caring nature accompany me daily. Okay, we're going to get started. We have interesting stories today, although I would say difficult stories. We're going to learn about how Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion was killed by the Romans, and we're going to start with why was he punished. The assumption is wasn't just, we're going to see both why the Romans decided to kill him and why, from God's perspective, Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion was killed. So it's interesting because we already saw earlier that what was the difference between him and Rabbi Lezer ben Parta, because Rabbi Lezer ben Parta both did Torah and Gelilu Chasadim. This version seems to say there was something else wrong that Rabbi Chanina did. So we saw that our daf ended with, they said, why did you learn Torah? And he said, like God commanded me. And they said, you're going to be burned, your wife is going to be killed, and your daughter is going to sit in a house of prostitutes and become a prostitute. So all of these things we're going to expand upon now. Alav lisrefa. So why did they say he had to be burned? What did he do wrong? Hoget Hashem ba'otiotav. He would, again, like usual, there's a many different interpretations, but Hoget Hashem ba'otiotav seems he's recited the special name of God, whether it's the four-letter word of God, name of God, Yud-Kei-Vav-Kei, or whether it's the 42-letter name of God. And what exactly he did he, he would say it, something along those lines, did something wrong in that sense. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. How could Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion have done this? Don't you remember this? We had a Mishnah in Sanhedrin that said in Perek Chelek, Elu she'en lem chelek l'olam haba, these people don't have a share in the world to come. Ha'omer ein Torah min hashamayim ve'ein tchiyat hamitim min haTorah. And Abba Shaul says, right, if you say there's no Torah isn't from God, you say there's no tchiyat hamitim, there's no resurrection of the dead in the Torah. Abba Shaul adds, Abba Shaul omer, af hoget Hashem ba'otiotav. That's when we had this last discussion about what exactly does it mean. But there, it says you don't get a portion of the world to come. First of all, he is going to get a portion of the world to come. We're going to see, and it doesn't make any sense that something so terrible, this is what Rabbi Chanina would be doing, to which we answer, as we've answered in other type of similar questions, Lihit lamed avad, he was doing it to learn so that he would understand what it was. So they say, Kedetanya, as it says in a braitot, we learned this already, Lo tilmad lasot, right? It says you're coming to the land, don't do Avodah goyima elu. This is a different issue. But so you can't do what the Gentiles are doing, but you can learn in order to teach, to be able to understand it properly, what it is. So, right, we saw this with other things. That's what he was doing. We saw it with kishuf. That was the first case we saw it, right? You're allowed to do kishuf in order to be able to identify it in court when someone's a mechashev. Anyway, so he was doing it to learn. So now the Gemara says, okay, if he was doing it to learn, it was permitted to learn, then Elamai Tami Anish. And we have to find something in between. On the one hand, it was bad. On the other hand, it wasn't terrible, but it had to have been something wrong. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gotten punished for it. So they say, Mishum Hoget Shashem Befarhes Yahava. He was someone who would recite God's name, the Shema Meforash, the special name of God, in public. That is, even though he was doing it to learn, he shouldn't have done it in public. That causes other people to misunderstand. And that's the problem. Okay. Alishtola Harika, his wife to get killed. By the way, this whole thing is hard for us to understand because we don't really understand what it means to recite the name of God and to, but anyway. Although the one thing we can understand, it's like being involved in something sanctified that should be right, but using it in the wrong way, almost like Nadav and Avihu came and they brought an Eish Zarah before God. So, out of religious fervor, but maybe doing it in a way that's, going too far. Alishtola Hariga, his wife got killed. Why? Delo michabe. She didn't protest his actions. She should have told him, you're not allowed to be doing that, and she did it. Mikanamru, from here, what do we derive? Today we're going to learn all sorts of interesting things from our stories, some side points. If you can stop someone from doing a sin, you get punished for it. And you don't, then you get punished. Okay, for his daughter to be sitting in a brothel. Now, what was her punishment? Well, one day she was walking on the street and before the prominent men of Rome. They said, wow, how beautiful is that woman? Look at the way she walks. Miyad dikdeka b'psiotah. She all of a sudden started walking even more in a sort of a attractive kind of manner. V'hainu da'amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, my dachtiv, and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said this is what this pasuk was referring to. Avon akeva yisubeni. This is in Tehillim. The sin of my feet, my steps, will encircle me. Avonot Adam dash ba'akeva ba'olam hazeh. The sins that somebody, here they mean literally, right? While she was walking, her akevim, right? While she was walking in this world, the steps that a person takes in this world, misubin lo liyom hadin. They come and encircle him in the Yom Hadin, in the Day of Judgment. And that's what happened with her. Her steps, literally, right, the way she walked, got her punished. When they walked out, they each said what we call tziduk hadin, although you're going to see from Rebbe's comment later, we'll get back and understand this a little better. Now, tziduk hadin is something we say right, at a funeral, something to say like Baruch Dayan Emet, right? Those kind of things. We have a slew psukim we say. In fact, the first pasuk is the one we're going to hear. Half the pasuk he said, half the pasuk his wife said. After we do tziduk hadin at a funeral, we add another pasuk, another few psukim, and one of them is the pasuk that the daughter said. So hu amar hatzur tamim pa'alo, he called Rachav mishpat. Okay, that's the first part of the pasuk. Ishto amra, there's a pasuk in from Hezinu, from the end of Devarim. Ishto amra el emunah ve'en avel tzadik v'yasharhu. Okay, so they each say this pasuk, which is basically saying God is just, and people basically there's no injustice in front of God. Bito amra gadol ha'etza v'rav ha'alila. I'm reading the whole thing. Okay, what this basically means is God knows what he's doing and he sees the actions of people and gives everybody what they deserve. Now that sounds perfectly relevant for her because the drachim, the way people walk, right, which again doesn't usually mean literally the way they walk, but in her case it did. And I'm a Rebbe. Now, Rebbe hears this story just like we had previously, and we're going to have again today on our daf. Rebbe hears a story and then has a reaction. What's his reaction? Kam gdolim tzadikim alalu shenizdamein lam shalosh mekorot shel tziduk hadin b'shat tziduk hadin. It's a very hard sentence to understand because now this goes back and explains a little bit better what just happened. So Rebbe is saying, wow, look at the maasim of tzadikim, okay, which even though they sinned, they were really considered righteous people. That when, right, that now he says, it happened upon them that these three psukim came out of their mouths at the moment of tziduk hadin. Okay, and now if we go back and it said when they went out, they each tzidku alav hadin. One interpretation is they just happened to randomly each one recite a pasuk, and and they happen to be tziduk hadin. That's almost like it sounds like Rebbe's saying. The Maharal says no. What was unique about their tziduk hadin was each pasuk really matched what they got with their punishment. Now with the daughter, it's very easy to see with the Rabbi Chanina and his wife. It's not so clear exactly what the connection of the pasuk is specifically uniquely to their punishment or their sin. But anyway, there's something here that's not 100% clear what exactly was so surprising. Maybe there wasn't such a thing about tziduk hadin, and they did it, and from there, this tziduk hadin custom came about. Maybe that's what we're saying, that they happened to do this, and really it is the time of tziduk hadin, because now that's what we do. A little bit unclear. Tanu Rabbanit. Now we're going to get the story of what happened when the Romans, why did the Romans catch Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion? Okay, what we heard so far, we're getting the story in bits and pieces. We started with, they basically, when they are upon him and they say, why did you learn Torah? And then he said, because God told me, and then they kill him. Now we're going to learn both what happened before that, what point did they catch him? We're even going to hear a previous conversation before that, and then we're going to hear about his cruel death, that they kill him. Tanu Rabbanit. Kishachal Rabbi Yosi ben Kisma. We're going to learn about him a little bit today. Halach Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion levakro. So Yosi ben Kisma was sick. Rabbi Chanina comes to visit him. Amar lo, Chanina achi. Don't you realize that God is basically making the Romans rule here? Shechribat beito, they destroyed his house. Sarfat yechalo, they burned his sanctuary. Hargat chasidav, killed his chasidim, right? The Jews who were the most adhering to God. Ibdat tovav, they lost their greatest people. Vadaini kayemet, and look, they're still there. God hasn't punished them yet. So don't you see that God is on their side right now? V'ani shamat, right? He's obviously a Roman sympathizer here, right? And he says, Ani shamati alecha shata yoshev v'osek b'Torah. A rumor has it that you sit and learn Torah. Umakil kilot barabim, and you gather people together and give shiurim in public. Right? Remember, the Romans said no learning Torah. Sefer Torah munach lecha b'cheikecha, and you have a Sefer Torah sitting, right? You sit with it in your lap. This is interesting. What does this remind you of? The first daf of our Masechet, when in the Ati Lavo, God sits with the Sefer Torah in his lap, right? And now he's saying, Rabbi Chanina, you're doing this, which theoretically should be a good thing. But he's basically saying, you're going to get yourself killed, right? It's not like he's a Roman sympathizer in the sense that he realized that we have to surrender to them. It's not that he believed in the Romans, but he's saying, obviously, God is making this happen. And if you don't protect yourself, you're going to get killed, which, foreshadowing, we know that he does get killed. Amar lo min hashamayim yeruchamu. He says, God will protect me, right? Amar lo. So Kisma says to him, Ani omer lecha dvarim shel ta'am. I'm telling you things that make a lot of sense. V'ata merely min hashamayim yeruchamu. You can imagine the conversation, right? And you're saying, God will help me? Come on. Like, it's a very nice statement, but it's not going to hold water when the Romans come to get you. Tamani, I wonder if lo yisrifu otcha, okay, those who know his death, right? He's basically prophesizing about his death. He says, I wonder if, I'd be shocked if this doesn't happen to you. They're going to burn you and the Sefer Torah in a fire. Amar lo, Rabbi Mani l'chaya olam haba. So Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion maybe kind of understands that this is his fate. So he says, well, will I live in the world? Will I have a place in the world to come? Amar lo, kluma sebaliatcha. Do you have any action you've done that can stand up there for you? Amar lo, ma'ot shapurim nitrafuli b'ma'ot shel tzedakah v'chilatim la'aniyim. We quoted this on the previous stuff to say, wait, didn't he do gemilut chesed? What do you mean he didn't? Okay, so what this means exactly, unclear whether it's money that was designated for Purim student got mixed up with regular money, and then, or perhaps it's his own Purim student money that he was planning to use for himself got mixed up with tzedakah money, and then he gave the whole thing to poor people. See, he did this nice action on behalf of other people. Amar lo im kein mechalkacha yechalki u'megoracha yehigorali. So even though Yosi ben Kisma was kind of saying, what are you doing learning Torah and all that? He said, but if you have this maaseh, you'll get a portion of the world to come. And what he's basically saying is, I want to be with your portion and with your fate, because you obviously are going to end up in Olam Haba. Okay, so you might get killed in this world, but you'll have a place in the Olam Haba. I'm just going to pause for one quick minute and mention something that has to be mentioned here, which is the issue. There's a big machloket based on this. The Rambam, basically, his approach to the world to come is that you can acquire your space in the world to come by one action alone, and that comes from here. That you see here, one action you do for somebody else, right, for other people, where you didn't take the money and say, oh, look, I gave some of my own money to charity and let me take it back. On that account, he got his share of the world to come. The Ran and others go against the Ran and say, no, this was just indicative. One action of many. This was one action. He gave an example. You don't just do one action in the world and get your place in Olam Haba. Now, we did see, obviously supporting the Rambam, is the other story of Katia Bar Shalom, right? And how you could get your portion of Olam Haba in 1 minute. And we're going to hear another story like that today. But it's a very interesting machloket. Obviously, nobody really knows how we get a portion of the world to come, right? But an interesting debate that comes up from the stuff. A lot of interesting things. Okay, now, Amru, they said, meaning, we always say, the way the story goes is, Lo hayu yamim moatim, there weren't very many days passed, meaning soon right after the story, because remember, Yosi ben Kisma was sick, Ach niftar Rabbi Yosi ben Kisma, he died, and ironically, what happens? Hachul kol gdolei Romi lekavlo, bisbidu haspei gadol, so all the great ones of Rome, you could see he had a nice relationship with them, that was why he understood them, and understood that they were going to kill Rabbi Chanina. He said, you don't protect yourself. Anyway, they all come to eulogize him, and when they're going back, who do they happen to meet? Mitza'u, the Rabbi Chanina ben Hadran, Shaya Yoshev Asek b'Torah. So because of Yosi ben Kisma's death, Rabbi Chanina gets caught, and they see him learning Torah, Makil Kilop Rabim, and he's gathering people to learn. B'Sefer Torah munach lo b'chayko, and he has a Sefer Torah in his lap. Hebi'u ukrachu b'Sefer Torah. They took him and they wrapped him in a Sefer Torah. Hikifu b'chavilei zmorot, v'itzitu b'hem et ha'or, and they put these wool next to him. They lit up a fire. They put twigs and branches around him. Then they brought the sfogim shel tzemer, the wool, shva'um b'mayim. They drenched them in water. They wanted to drench it in water so that the fire would torture him and take much longer to burn, and really to make his death a prolonged, painful death. Amra lo bito, his daughter said to him, Abba, echa bekach, I'm going to see you die like this? Like, do something. Amar la, umalei ani nisrafti levadi haya davar kashe li. If it was just me dying by myself, it would be very difficult for me. But now that I'm burning with the Sefer Torah, I know that whoever's going to, meaning God, is going to go against those who did this terrible thing to the Torah. They're going to do, so God is going to basically avenge my death also, and I feel comfortable I'm dying with the Sefer Torah with me. Amrulo Talmidav, Rabbi, ma taro'es. The student said, God, what do you see? Now, what exactly they asked? Tosfot says, well, what did they see that they asked him, what do you see? In other words, they saw something they didn't really understand. So, or maybe they heard something, or maybe we don't know what exactly, but they had, for some reason, they said, what do you see? And he says, Amar lahem gilyon nisrafim v'otiot porchot. Very famous. He says, I see the parchment burning, but the letters of the Torah are flying in the air. They're not being burned, just the parchment's being burned. So now they say, just open your mouth, let the fire go in, and you'll die quicker. Like everyone was suffering, seeing him tortured like this. He says, better I should be taken by the one who wants to take me, but not do it myself. In other words, I'm going to die the way God said I should die. I'm not going to hasten my death, because that'll be almost like committing suicide. It'll be causing my own death. Now, Tosfot, it's very interesting. I can't help but go off on these tangents, because Tosfot says here, Omer Rabbeinu Tam, Dehecha Shira Penya Vilum Obdei Kochavim L'Avera, in a case where they're basically going to torture you, and if not, they're going to, in other words, they're trying to make you to be, now Tosfot is living in the time of the Crusades, where the Christians were trying to get the Jews to convert, and he's obviously referring to that. So he says, if they're going to torture you, where terrible torture in order to convert you to their religion, he says, even though here it says you can't kill yourself, you can't hasten your death, he says you can actually commit suicide. And then he quotes a Gemara. This is very apropos for the 3 weeks. Like there's all these, there's a lot of, by the way, the antidote in the Slichot, and there's some keynote that talk about this during the Masa'ot Tzlav, where people were killing themselves. And here, this is the famous story in the Gemara, in the time of the Romans. When it was the time of the destruction of the temple, these children threw themselves in the water, committed suicide. And he basically says, what's Rabbeinu Tam trying to do? To justify the custom in his day, that was people were killing themselves al Kiddush Hashem. But here, he wasn't willing to do it, right? Now, what he's trying to say is the situation is different. Right here, he was going to die anyway. There was no point to hasten his death, whereas there, they were going to convert them. And better not to be converted and better to die. Al Kiddush Hashem. But again, it's Tosfot very often, and Rabbeinu Tam in particular, was trying to justify minhagim of his time. Sometimes they didn't exactly reconcile perfectly with all the sugyot. Again, Tosfot loves to just, here's a different sugyot, which fits with my theory. Right? So anyway, very interesting. Continuing the story. Amar lo klatstoneri. Klatstoneri is the person who's committing the execution. Who's, what's the word? Making it happen. So Rebbe, he says, Rebbe, now he realizes who Rabbi Chanina, this must be a great man. Maybe he saw the letters fly. We don't know exactly what. The executioner, thank you for helping me with the words. Rebbe, if I make the flame a little bit higher and I take away all the wet pieces of wool that I put next to your heart, will you bring me to the world to come with you? Amar Lohain, he said, yes, I will. He shavali, will you swear to me? Nishbalo, he swears to him. Miyad hirbaba shall have it, shall temmer me'ali bobi, yatzanish matoba meira. So he does what he promises, and Rabbi Chanina dies right away. Apu kafatz v'nafal letocha or. Now this klatstoneri, executioner, jumps into the fire as well. Yatz'a bat kova amra, Rabbi Chanina ben Hadran uklatstoneri, muzmanim hen l'chayol namaba. So just like Katir Bar Shalom, right? This guy gets his place in the world to come with Rabbi Chanina. A bat kol, a heavenly voice comes out and announces that. And again, when Rebbe hears the story, Bacha Rebbe cries, Va'amar yesh koneh olamo b'sha'achat, yesh koneh olamo b'kama shanim, right, as I mentioned before, Rebbe suffered, I think, according to the Midrash, for 13 years. And basically he said, why did I have to suffer so long? And these people got it in 1 minute, which again, this supports the Rambam's reading that you could do one action and get olam haba. Okay, now we get to Bruria. Remember Bruria, the wise wife of Rabbi Meir. Now Bruria, to be to Rabbi Meir, Barte to Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion Havai. So she happened to be the daughter of Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion. Now, not the one that was taken to the brothel, but she was the sister of the one. So Amralo, she says to her husband Rabbi Meir, Zila b'milta diyat v'achatai b'kubash zono. Right, it's a disgrace that my sister is there. Shakal tarkiva dinari v'azal. So he takes a bag of money, a certain amount of money, I think 300 something of dinarim, and 300 pounds or some weight of dinarim, and not pounds, but another weight of dinarim, a tirkava. Amar ilo it avid ba'isur mit avid nisa I avdi isur lo it avid nisa. Listen, a miracle is going to happen to her if she didn't do anything. If she did do something there, meaning if she slept with men there, now we don't know how much time passed, but she was in this place for a while. We don't know how long, but if she didn't sleep with anyone, then a miracle will happen. If she did, then I can't help her. She dresses up as a Roman parash. I forget how it translates, a rider or something. Amar la hashmi'ini, so a horseman. Thank you. So he says, sleep with me. Amar le dishana. I have my period. I can't sleep with you right now. Amar la mitrachna mirtach, which seems to mean I'll wait for you. Amralo, Nefishin Tuva, there's a lot of other women here. V'ika Tuva hacha dishapira minai. There's even more beautiful women than me. Amal, he said, Shema mina lo avdi surah. It must be she didn't do anything. Because kol da'ate amr lehachi, she must say this to every man that comes. Aza legabe shomer dida. So he goes to her the person in charge for the watchman, the guard. Amar le havaniela. He says, give her to me. Amar le mistafina mi machuta. Now, he didn't mean give her to me to sleep with. He said, give her to me. I'm going to take her out of here. The guy says, I'm scared of the Romans. They're going to kill me if I do that. Amar la shkol tarkaba dinari. Take all the money that I brought. Palga plach upalga lehavilach. Half of it used for bribing them, and half of it keep for yourself. Amar le v'chishami ma'avid. What am I going to do when the bribery money's over? I have to continually bribe them. The money's going to disappear at some point. I'll have no money to pay them. They'll kill me. Amar le ema elah de Meir anani. Say the following words: the God of Meir, answer me. Umitzelet, and you will be saved. Amar le. So he says to him, Umiyemar, turning now to Amabet, Umiyemar dahachika. How can you prove to me it's going to work? Amar le hashtachazi. He said, I'll show you right now. So now the question is, who throws? We're going to see something. Someone's going to throw something. Some people think it's Rabbi Meir. Some people think it's this guy. The whole story doesn't make so much sense. But Havahanu kalbe davaka'achle inashi. There were dogs there that ate humans. Shakal kala shadabihu. And he took a clod of earth and threw it at them. Now we're going to assume that he took a clod of let's go with the fact that it was the guard who does this, because if it wasn't the guard, it doesn't make any sense. If it was Rabbi Meir, it doesn't make any sense that the dog started attacking the guard. On the other hand, it doesn't make sense. The guard did it because the guard is going to endanger himself, have these dogs attacking him. Some people claim that he did it as a test, but he had a solution. If the dogs really would come attack him, especially, I imagine, he managed the dogs, so he had some sort of way he was going to protect himself. It's something that is a little tricky about how to understand this. Anyway, it's all they're trying to make a point here. So he takes a clod of earth and throws it at the dog. And they jump on him to eat him, kill him. Amar Allah de Meir anani. So he says the words, incantation that Rabbi Meir tells him to say, shavkua, and they leave him alone. V'yavele, so he gives him the money, he lets her out, and gives her, yavele means he gives her to Rabbi Meir. L'sof ishtama milta be'malka. Now, in the end, obviously, the Romans find out about what happened. All they find out right now is that this guard let her out. Achua askol kifa. So they want to go hang him. Amar elah de Meir anani achtua. So he says elah de Meir anani, and they take him down. Okay, in other words, they put him up at the gallows to hang him, and they brought him down. In other words, something happened. Seems like maybe some people think maybe the rope ripped, and like every time they tried to kill him, it didn't work, and they realized this isn't going to happen, so they let him go. But they don't let him go completely. Amrulay, my hi. They said, what's going on here? Like, how are you being saved? And who's this mayor? And what's going on? Amar luhachi avamasa. So he tells them exactly what happened. Achu chakiku lidmute de Rabbi Meir apitre de Romi. They now take, those wanted signs. There's some convict that's wanted. So this is the early wanted sign. They take the image of Rabbi Meir. They engrave it into the entrance of Rome. Amre, and they said, Kol dechazi lepartzufa hadin lete. Anyone who sees this person, bring him in. Yom achad chazyuhu. So one day, some Romans see him. Rahu tapatre, they run after him. Rad mikamayu, he runs from them. Al lebezonot, and he runs into a brothel. Now, right, comes full circle, right? This whole story started there. He ends up there. He could amre. Some people say it wasn't that he ran into a brothel. It was that bishule of de kochavim chaza. He saw food that was cooked by a Gentile. Okay, we're going to see all these actions that basically there's no way Rabbi Meir would do. Okay, and he does this as a way to disguise who he is. So either he goes into the Beit Zonot or he dips his finger. Okay, tamish baha. He sticks one finger into the food. And then mitak baha, and then he sticks a different finger in his mouth as if he's eating the bishul akum. It's kind of interesting. They're comparing bishul akum, which we're going to learn about later. You can see it's definitely not as severe as going into a house of prostitutes. So you have an interesting comparison here of stories, but he makes it look like he's eating it, but he's really not. So some people say Eliyahu came, disguised himself as a prostitute, krachte, and then hugged him. And then the Romans say, Chas Amre Chas v'Shalom, Rabbi Meir havalo v'Avid Hachi. There's no way this could be Rabbi Meir. If he never would have done that, this must be the wrong guy. And he gets away. Kam Arak Ata leBavel. Well, Rabbi Meir runs away to Babylonia. And thus ends our story. But not exactly, because the end of the story kind of opens up a whole other story, which is, which the Gemara is going to tell us about. But Ikeda Amre Mehaima says, so some people say the reason he ran to Babylonia, so it was clear, is he ran to Babylonia at some point in his life. Some people think it was from this story, and that's why he ran to Babylonia. Ikeda Amre Mimase de Bruria. Some people think it was because of the story of Bruria. Now, what's the story of Bruria? Well, Rashi tells us, and this doesn't appear in the Gemara, but Rashi tells us this famous story. I see some noddings of heads here. That one time she was mocking the rabbis who said Bruria was known to be a very wise woman, and she was knocking the rabbis about the famous line that basically puts women down. Nashim datan kaloten alai, right? Women are lightheaded, which also means, or some of the interpretations are they're likely to engage in prostitution or sleep with other men, cheat on their husbands, maybe also cause men to sin, all that. And Amar Lechayecha, Rabbi Meir was upset with her that she was mocking the rabbi's words. And in the end, Sofech lehodot lidivrehem, you're going to admit that they're right. And he told one of his students basically to test her out and to basically a crazy story, according, right? That this really happened. I don't know. But basically, the Hiftzir Bayamim Rabim Achinit. So the man seduces her for days and days and days until finally she gives in, succumbs. Ukishinodala. And when she realizes that her husband set her up for this, Chanka, she strangles herself. And then Rabbi Meir ran away out of embarrassment and humiliation, which you can imagine. Terrible story. I don't know the source of it, but Rashi obviously had a Masoret about this story. Okay, with that, we're getting back to our Gemara. So thus ends the whole section of the Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion story. If you remember, how did we get to all this? Because of the Gardom. Remember, you can't help them build their Gardom. Their Gardom was a place where they would hang people. And from that, we got into all these stories where they tried to, right, they wanted to hang. Number one, Rabbi Elazar ben Horkadus, then Rabbi Elazar ben Parta, and then Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion, who actually gets killed. Tanu Rabbanan. Holech, right, and the Gardom isn't necessarily the gallows. It also could be just the tribune, where they judge the people. Tanu Rabbanan. Now we're going to get back to things that you should do. And the main thing we're going to talk about now until the end of the daf is all sorts of activities that were very popular in the Roman time period that, everybody knows about. These, the gladiators and the bullfights and all these things that are not really appropriate places to go. Theaters even, things like that. We're going to learn about a word, moshav leitzim, very famous, right, of engaging in meaningless things. Perhaps they talk about places where people scorn other people, and there's how much is it negative or just not positive. We're going to talk about different elements of it. So we're going to bring us a little braitot. Tanu Rabbanan, ha'olech li'itzdadinim ulekarkom, v'ra'a sham et hanachashim v'et hachabarim, bukyon, umukyon, mulyon, belulyon, blurim, salgurin, harei ze moshav leitzim. So if you go to the stadiums and the karkom, Rashi explains what's karkom. It's where people besiege a city, and there they would have all sorts of shows going on while they were besieging the city. I guess when they would take a break or I don't know what, and they would have shows going on. And you saw the nechashim and the chabarim, those are all these magicians doing things. And then they say all these names of bukyon, mukyon, and all these funny names of obviously funny, show names for clowns and the such. Hareza moshav leitzim. This is leitzanut, right? The word leitzan comes from leitzim. Okay, this is like frivolity. And Alehem Katuv Omer, we're going to now quote, and we're going to see this darshaned a number of times here. The first two psukim in the book of Tehillim. Okay, Ashrei Isha Shelo Alach B'Atzar V'She'im. Happy is the person who didn't go in the counsel of wicked people. Ubederech Chata'im Lo Amad. He didn't stand in the path where the sinners were. Moshav Leitzim Lo Yashav. He didn't sit with the leitzim, where the leitzim sit. Ki im b'Torah Hashem Chatzo, because instead he went in the way of the Torah and learning Torah. B'Torah Yagei Yomam V'Layla. He would learn Torah day and night. So now we're going to learn here. Ashrei Isha Shelo Alach B'Cholei Ki im Torah Hashem Chatzo Halamadta Shedvarim Halalu Miviim Et Ha'adam Lidei Bittul Torah. What's the problem with Moshav Leitzim and they darshan here? It's that they prevent you from learning Torah. That's the problem. Urimini. Now this contradicts the fact that you can't go to an Itztadinin or the Karkom. Contradicts the following source: Litztadinin mutar mipnei shetzoveach umatzil. It's actually a good reason to go, because you can scream and perhaps save the person who's about to get killed. Okay, by the gladiator, in the gladiator races, in the bullfights, you could perhaps scream and stop the fight. I don't know how you would do that. I can't imagine, you're in this, and you're going to somehow stop and they'll listen to you, but perhaps you have a way to save the person. So now you can also perhaps save the people in the city who are being besieged. So you can go there, but for other reasons, basically. As long as you're not counted among them. Either this means as long as you don't sort of join them in what they're doing, or perhaps it means, and they seem to say this really talking about the siege, you don't want to be counted with them. Because the people in the city might surrender if they see more people on the other side. So make sure it's clear that you're not with them and you're not fighting with them, because otherwise it'll scare the people inside and think that there's more people against them. Kasha itztadin and itztadin and kasha karkom karkom. So this source says you can go. The other source said you couldn't go. How do we resolve this? That's why it makes clear the mitchashev is only the siege. In the siege situation, we understand if you're with them and you make yourself look like you're counted among them, then you can't do that. If you're not, then you can. So that the two can be reconciled. But there's no way to reconcile. Either go or don't go, right? If you could potentially save them, then it means you're allowed to go. And if we don't look at that as an issue, then you can't go. So these contradict. To which they answer Tanai. It's a machloket Tanaim. There's two different Tanaitic opinions. Ditanya, as it says in a braitot, and then each source matches a different opinion. That's what we saw. Don't go because it's moshav leitzim. Rabbi Nata matir mipnei shnei dvarim. Echad mipnei shetzoveach umatzil. Echad mipnei sheme'idi dudi shala asiyah. Two reasons Rabbi Natan says you can go. One is potentially you could save the person being killed. Number two, if you can't save them, you can at least testify. There's no Jews there. We won't have anyone to testify the person was dead, and then his wife will become a naguna. So it's fascinating, right? In order to permit agunot, we have all sorts of heterim here. We allow you to go to a bullfight, let's say, or a gladiator match, so that if someone dies, you'll be able to testify and let their wife remarry. Very interesting answer. Okay, so in the end, we resolve the contradiction by saying it's two different opinions. Tanu Rabbanan, another braitot. Ein ochim letartiaot u'lekisaot, theaters, circuses, mipnei shemizablim sham zibul avodah zarah, divrei Rabbi Meir, because they're offering things up to avodah zarah, or they're using the proceeds for avodah zarah, or somehow there's what this zibul is not so clear, but it's somehow related to avodah zarah. Chachamim omrim makom shemizablim asur mishum mipnei chashad avodah zarah. If it's a place where they are, now not all of them do, the rabbis say. So if it is, then there's a concern. If you go there, people will think that you're engaging in avodah zarah worship. Either which way, it's going to be forbidden. But if they're not engaged in avodah zarah, then it's moshav leitzim, because it's meaningless actions that you shouldn't be involved in. My benai, what's the difference between them? No one really knows what the difference between what. Some people say the difference between the two answers of the Chachamim. Some will say the difference between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis. We'll go with that one. Amar Rav Chanina Misura Nasav Natan Ika Beinai, which would mean if you want to do business there, right? You want to open a stand like a popcorn stand. So if we're worried about you're engaging in Avodah Zarah or you're doing moshav leitzim, you're not. You're working and making money for yourself, so that's okay. But if we say that all those places, Rabbi Meir says they're mizablim avodah zarah, then you're basically selling things, and the people are using what you sell for Avodah Zarah, and then I guess not popcorn, okay, but they're offering it up to their gods, and then you're basically making money off of Avodah Zarah. You're not allowed to gain benefit from Avodah Zarah, so that would be a problem. Darash Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. My dechtiv. We're back to this pasuk in Tehillim. Notice the verbs. He didn't go to where the Rishaim are. He didn't stand where the sinners are, and he didn't sit in the moshav leitzim. If he didn't go, then what's he doing standing there? If he didn't stand, what's he doing sitting there? Meaning these are all usually first you go, you stand, and then you sit. So if already he didn't go, right? And if he didn't sit, then what's the leitzanut? Like he's not involved in that. So what it's trying to say is like this. She'im halach, if you go, but you say, I'll go, but I'll stay at a distance. In the end, you're going to stand with them. Im amad, if you stand with them, sofol shev, right? The slippery slope. Then you'll sit with them. Im yeshev, sofol lutz. If you sit, then you're going to be among these people who, again, if you understand it as they're scorners, they're right, they have no care for other humans. Im latz, alav katuv omer, im chachamta lach, im latzta levatcha tisa. If you gain wisdom, if you engage in wisdom and making yourself smarter, you will gain, you will have smarts with you, you'll be wiser. But in latzta, if you get involved in this leitzanut stuff, levatcha tisa, you're just going to carry it on your own. There's nothing. You're going to have nothing from it. Amar Rabbi Elazar, now we're going to see the rabbis all say, we're going to learn from this pasuk. This is going to happen to you, and that's going to happen to you. Again, the fear method. So if you get involved in this moshav leitzim, you're going to have torture. You're going to end up with suffering. It's going to come upon you. Shneimar v'ata al titlo titzu pen yachzeku mosrechem milashon yisurim. Yachzeku will strengthen the yisurim. You're going to have a lot of torture, sufferings. Amar lu Rava Rabbanit bimtuta, please. Be'ina minaychu. Rava says to the rabbis, please, I beg you. Lo titzu de lo lete alachin yisurim. You're just going to end up with suffering. Amar Rav Katina, kolam elotzet mizonotav mitmatim. You will lose your parnasa. Shneimar, you'll have less money. Mashach yado et lotzitzim. Another pasuk, God will take his hand away from those who are lotzitzim. So you're going to end up not having money. Okay, this is again, the rabbis like to say, they don't want you to engage in something, they try to show you all the punishments you're going to get. Fear tactics. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, kolam elotzet nofel begehenom. Okay, the worst of the worst, you're going to end up in hell. Shneimar, zayd yahir, that's someone who's intentionally arrogant. Leitz shemo is called a leitz. Osebe evrat zadon. Now, what do we understand? Osebe evrat zadon. Ein evra ela gehenom. We've seen this before. The word evra connects with gehenom. Shenemar yom evra hayom ahu. That day will be, really evra means anger. The anger of God will come out on that day, but that day means the day of gehenom and at the day of God's wrath. So this means basically you will get gehenom if you engage in moshav leitzim. Amar Rabbi Yoshaya, by the way, what did it say in the beginning of the pasuk? Zayd Yahir, one who was intentionally arrogant. So now he's going to say also arrogance ends up in Gehenom. Kolam et Yahir, if you're arrogant, you'll fail Gehenom. Shneimar Zayd Yahir leit shmo, sebe evrat zadon ve'en evra ela Gehenom. Shneimar yom evra yom ahu. Same pasuk, learning the same thing. Gehenom is a punishment for both those things. Amar Rabbi it should be Chanina bar Chanilai. Kolam et lotzet gorem klaya la'olam. Okay, you also cause destruction to the world, because look at what comes right after that. Shneimar, this is the end of a different pasuk we saw before. Ata al titlo tzitzu, okay, it's pasuk in Yeshayahu. Pen yachzeku mosrechem, ki chala v'nechratza shamati. Ki chala means you will be wiped out, destroyed. Klaya is destruction. And nechratza is God, right? It is decided, determined. Okay, v'nechratza shamati. Amar Rabbi Elazar kashehi. It's so difficult, the punishment for this. It starts with mosrechem. The yisurim starts with suffering, and safok laya, and the end is total destruction. Darash Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. Ashrei isha shelo alach l'totia. Oh, okay, so now Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi is going to take this pasuk. We've been doing this in different ways, but we're taking all these different pasukim, that one in Tehillim, the one in Yeshayahu, okay, all these different pasukim that talk about lo tzitzu. The other one was in Mishlei, by the way, in Chacham Tacham Talach v'latza levatcha tisa. And we're darshing them in different ways and all really getting around to this issue of moshav leitzim and the Romans and the things they were engaged in. This is all ways of, number one, getting the Jews to separate themselves from the Romans, right? Which we're going to get to Bishul Akum and all that also, to separate themselves. But this is another way of separating by saying, don't go to their places, their entertainment places. And also because their entertainment places often involved killing of people and they were cruel. Okay, but it sounds like even if it isn't that, or even if there wasn't Avodah Zarah going on there, it was still something that we wanted to keep them away from. And this is going to stress it really, which is it's really because of the whole bitul Torah element and wasting your time in life. So we're going to end with this one. It's last Rasha. Darash Rishon ben Pazi Ashrei Isha Shelo Alach. What is that? L'tartiaot u'lekarkisaot shel ovdei kochavim. Okay, lo alach. First thing is don't go to the theaters and the circuses. B'derech chata'im lo amad. That's the next one. Zeh shelo amad b'kinyon. Okay, kinyon was, by the way, where they would kill animals in a cruel manner. Ubemoshav leitzim lo yashav shelo yashev b'tachbulot. Okay, the tachbulot is, forgot how they translate that. Second, I think that translation of that one, but another thing that the Romans are doing. Tachbulot, right? This is the hard one to understand. Some people say like, oh, right. Some people say like the magic stuff where they're like quick with the eye and very smart, they make them look like all these things are going on and they can kind of trick you into thinking things. Shema Yomar Adam, this is my favorite line, okay, I won't involve myself in these things, but I'll just go to sleep, okay? Don't think that's okay. Okay? This is all besides the bad of these things. It's also just about being lazy. And don't just go to sleep, and sleep all day. But what should you do? You should engage in Torah. Okay, so we have like these polar opposites, what the Romans were doing and the Torah. And again, this is trying to stress the elements of that, which is interesting because we started the story with Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion, who represented the Torah versus the Romans, right? There was this complete clash. Maybe almost you see why they were against the Torah, because it clashed with their values, or I don't know if you can call them values, but right. Okay, so we started with the story of Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion, how he was tragically killed, and how his wife and daughter also were punished. How Bruria got Rabbi Meir to get her out, but then in the end he had to run away because of it. And then we got to all these sources about not engaging in the activities that were very popular Roman activities, staying away from them, and all the drashot we had about the psukim about it, and all the things that will happen to you if you engage in it, and that the Torah is really the antidote to that. With that, wishing everyone a good day and a Shavua Tov, and should hear B'savot Tovot B'karov.